Need a creative approach to your next short story or short story unit? Stations can provide so many inroads while allowing students to proceed at their own pace and based on their own interests. Plus, they give you a chance to move around the room and help out individual students or small groups that need you. So, today on the podcast, I want to share some creative options when it comes to short story stations. We'll talk about the fundamental elements that can help make your stations a success, like clear tasks, resources, scaffolds, and models, as well as ideas specific to approaching the key elements of short stories. Could you use all these activities with short stories, even if you weren't doing stations? Sure, that's definitely an option too, but they would make excellent stations. Are you ready? Hey there, I'm your host, Betsy Potash, and one-pagers, project-based learning, and choice reading are my jam. I believe in you, and my goal is to help you explore all the creative possibilities you dream of for your classroom. I'm an educator, a chocolate cake aficionado, a traveler who can't wait to get back to Barcelona, and the kind of mom who brings her own mini makerspace to her kid's classroom when she comes to volunteer. I know this for sure, creativity isn't always easy. As a creative teacher, you get parent calls you treasure and plenty of sidelong comments you'd rather forget. But here's the bottom line. Creative education can ignite a spark in your students and change their lives forever. You and I know this. You're an innovator. And while it's sometimes hard, it's so worth it. So let's explore the world of creative education together. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast. First things first, let's start with how to build your stations. Stations do require more prep than a lot of activities, but once you're set up, the lesson takes care of itself, which is really nice. So you're going to start by pulling your seating into your stations. How many kids that you have at each station depends on your numbers, your room, and kind of your students' ability to focus. You can always have multiple versions of each station spread out if you need to be able to move your students to more areas of the room. So for example, if you have 4 stations worth of activities, but you have a lot of kids, you can easily have 8 stations, just label 2 with the same label. Speaking of which, find a way to label every station. You can make a poster, you can have a laminated handout that says Station 1, you can buy one of those big wooden craft numbers from Michael's and paint it with glittery paint. Whatever works for you, you want students to be able to look at the room and easily see what stations they have been to and what stations they haven't been to. Then at each station, you're going to want to have resources or prompts of some kind and a specific task or maybe 2 tasks for students to complete. You want to have plenty of copies of whatever your resources are. If you're going to have 3 chairs at a station, you want to have 3 copies of the resource so that no one's sitting around waiting for a turn. If you're going to be using technology at the station, you want to have as much technology as you will have students, right? So you just want everything to match up so that everyone can be working. Then, in addition to whatever resources and tasks you need at your station, think about scaffolds. Think about who's going to be sitting here during period A. What are they going to need to be a success with this? Can I provide some sentence stems in this writing station? Can I provide a range of different types of models? You want every student to be able to be successful at the station. You can also think, if there's not a scaffold that will get it all done, you can think, okay, am I going to put myself at this station? Am I going to be the scaffold? Will this be the station where I really help students who are struggling with this particular type of activity? You can also think a little bit about kids who are going to zoom through a station super easily. You can add like a bonus challenge or some additional reading for early finishers, any kind of like way to expand on the activity that students might actually really be intrigued by and want to do. Finally, to help the process be successful, consider giving every student a little handout that lists the stations and tasks. And then you can put out like check marks, like check mark stickers or stamp kind of things at each station, or like little smelly stickers, or just something that allows them to say like, hey, I did this station, I've completed it. And then they can turn that in at the end along with their work to sort of show you their progress through the room. Oh, last thing, know what your expectations are for how the students are going to move around the room. Let them know in advance. If they should be thinking like 10 minutes a station, let them know that so they don't spend the entire period at one station. If they should be thinking that they're going to be doing every station alone, let them know that. Or if they can travel in partners, let them know that. Any kind of instructions to do with process you want to give out right away, and that'll save you a lot of headaches later. Okay, so that's all of our kind of station fundamentals. Now let's turn to short story stations. You could have all of these set up in the room. You could have just a few. If you are going to do them all, you might want to have several days available. Okay, station number 1, let's talk about setting ideas. So anything here would be setting. You could have all of these activities available or just a couple. One of my favorite things for setting is to create an annotated map. I'm really fascinated by the idea of annotating images. And so have them draw out the text, the locations in the text on a piece of paper. You can have a map of the setting already there and have them do the annotating, or you can actually have them draw the map. What are the main locations happening in your text? Is there like a house and a school and a cliff and a pond? Like, where do they think that those are located? They're going to have to dive into their book quite a bit to try to figure out what there is, where it is, and then you can have them go in with quotes and descriptors, and maybe even with some colored pencils or colored markers to sort of give as much detail to the map as they can, which reflects the text. So they're going to have little pop-out boxes with quotations or adjectives that describe different parts of the setting. Another fun idea would be to have a mood board for the setting. So think about mood boards that you see like for a baby shower or a wedding or a room of a house. Students can use an online program like Canva or Slides and create a mood board that represents what they're seeing from the text. They can use different elements like colors, textures, photos, emojis, even little cartoon graphics. They're trying to represent the feeling that they get from various setting descriptions. So you're going to have them put in all those visuals, but you're also going to have them add things like quotations, descriptors, their own words to help sort of convey the feeling of this setting. I created one of these as an example in the show notes, which you can see, and I really had a lot of fun. I think this would be a lot of fun for students to do. So, leaving setting behind, just as a reminder, you're going to want to have a big sign that says Station 1 setting. You're going to want to have task cards for either one of these activities or both of these activities, any resources that can help them, any scaffolds that can help them. Okay, number 2, let's talk about style. Style is a great station for short stories. You can have students diving into what makes the writing in the short story unique. What separates it from other authors' style? So I'm going to give you a couple of possibilities. If you want students to dig into the author's style by trying to imitate it in their own writing, try having them choose and then create their own imitations of mentor sentences. So for this station, they would go through the text and they would choose sentences that they find to be really unique, really impactful. Maybe they have incredible literary devices, or it's an example of like how succinct the author is, or an example of like the type of descriptive language the author uses. Have them collect these mentor sentences. Maybe they write 5 of them. Maybe they write 10. And then have them explore writing similar sentences for a story of their own. So their goal is going to be to take those mentor sentences, use them as inspiration, and then either write individual sentences or maybe a couple paragraphs of a story where they are playing around with whatever the author's strengths are. If you would like to focus more on analysis instead of creative writing, then I'm going to suggest another activity called a Post-it collage. This is a lot of fun. You can give kids 2 colors of Post-its, and you can have them use one color to demonstrate the author's style. So these are basically going to be quotations. They'll throw them up on the wall, and as they start to gather, as more and more students are adding quotations, they can try to put their stylistic example near similar stylistic examples. So if they find an incredible metaphor, and their point is that the author is great with metaphors, they can look at this collage on the wall and look and see if anybody else has metaphors up there, and they can put their metaphor near somebody else's metaphor. Now, after they've put up some examples, you can have another color of Post-it and say, okay, put up, 4 purple Post-its with examples of author style, and then put up a yellow Post-it that shows your analysis. So put it next to some purple Post-its where you notice a theme, and describe in your own words what's going on here with the author style. What do these purple Post-its represent? And you could have them do 1, you could have them do 2, you could have them do 5, whatever you want. Okay, characterization. Let's talk about a characterization station. There are so many fun things you can do with characterization. This is something I've really gotten into in the last year. Characterization can kind of slip by our students. They can get to know characters without really realizing how they're getting to know the characters. But there are some creative activities that can help them dig a little deeper and really notice where those details are coming from. One of them would be to create a characterization one-pager or a characterization open mind, which is a lot like a one-pager, except it's in like a silhouette of a person's head. For either of these things, you're going to ask students to use both imagery and quotations to demonstrate what's happening with this character. What are their dreams? What are their key traits? How are they shifting, growing, changing? What are their relationships like with other people? And they're going to use that combination of the visuals and the language to help them really demonstrate the depth of a character. Another idea, if you want it to be a bit quicker, would be to have students examine a character closely, examine what they know, examine what they've learned, and then write a 6-word memoir for that character. This is a fun way to try to get at characterization in a really succinct way. What 6 words capture the journey of the character so far? And then you want to have them do a little bit of analysis, 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, to explain why did they choose those 6 words with reference back to the text. Okay, next let's talk about argument. An argument station can help students focus on anything that you're working on related to argument in class. If students are working on developing a thesis, have them work on developing an original thesis based on whatever text, whatever part of the short story you've been reading or the whole short story. If you have been working on having them respond to a prompt that you develop, you can have them work on, creating the introduction or outlining for a thesis that you provide. If you're working on something more complex, like a counterargument, you can have a station where they develop a counterargument to an argument that you provide and then argue for the argument addressing the counterargument. Or if you're in the mood to go with something with a little bit more of a spin, you could try like hexagonal thinking for argument. You could have a bunch of blank hexagons available, maybe give students a thesis and then invite them to find quotes that are related, different events in the novel that are related, and start playing around with them in hexagonal thinking web. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about how you could incorporate a creative writing station into your short story station day. This is a fun one. There are a million different directions you could go with this, so I'm just going to share a couple. One of my favorite go-tos for creative writing is the writing makerspace. I've had Angela Stockman on the show a couple of times to talk about this wonderful thing, and it can really help students break down their writer's block. If they stare at a blank piece of paper and think, oh my gosh, I just have no idea what to write about, when it comes to creative writing, a writing makerspace can really help them vault over that. So you don't have to have a ton of materials. Maybe you have Play-Doh, maybe you have Legos, maybe you have some markers and white paper. Have them create a character at this station. Any character. It can be a little animal, it can be an alien, it can be a magical dragon, it can be, somebody who looks like their best friend. And then once they're looking at that character and thinking about that character and they can see that character, then they start to write a story about the character. So have them write the first few paragraphs of their story at the station. Just whenever they feel stuck, have them look at their own character. What does it look like the character is dreaming about? What does it look like would be the first thing that character would say if it suddenly came to life and started shouting? Another option, if you've got a bit of a postcard collection like me, or if you can cut some pictures out from magazines or print some from online, I really like using postcards as inspiration for writing. This is something I used to do a lot. I have a huge postcard collection, which I'm constantly adding to. And I think students get such a joyful jolt of inspiration when they're looking at all these pictures from all over the world, and they pick one up, and then you ask them to set their story inside of that postcard. And again, it's very similar to designing a character. It just helps them over that first hurdle. What's going on? What should I write about? They can start to imagine a scene inside the postcard once they see it. Finally, the last idea is kind of a spin on the first two. You might use story cards to help students get started. These are quite fun to make in Canva. I made a bunch last month and it didn't take long and it was really a lot of fun. You just think about categories that would help inspire students in their writing. The categories I used were characters, conflicts, and settings. And then you just go through and pull photos that you think would appeal to your students of a bunch of different people or animals, or like I said, like mythological figures in your characters set. For conflicts, what could create a conflict? You could show a hospital. You could show a person looking exhausted. You could show 20 mosquitoes flying in a cloud. Like, your conflict doesn't have to be some huge thing. It doesn't have to be like a war, just like a small thing that could get students thinking, how could there be a conflict related to an exhausted person? And it's just like with every kind of prompt, it just sort of gets the wheels turning. Once you have your story cards with these sort of different elements, then students can choose. They can choose a character, a conflict, a setting, or they can just choose a couple characters and come up with their own conflict or setting, or they can just choose a setting, or they don't have to choose anything. These can just be a fun way to get students started thinking, get the wheels turning so that they can dive into their first few paragraphs of a story without too much strain. All right, let's wrap this up. Now you've got some ideas for your short story stations, and I bet more ideas are coming to you just listening to these ideas. Of course, again, these activities could all work as whole class activities or small groups as well, but stations add in that element of choice and self-pacing, which is really nice. Plus, they give you the ability to help kids working at stations that are challenging for them. You are not as busy during stations, and you're really able to float and go over and help kids out. So let's just run through our ideas again. You can have a station about setting. You can have a station about style. You can have a station about characterization, one about argument, and finally, your creative writing station. Probably you could think of more too, but these 5, I think, are really fun, easy wins for your short story unit. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about short story stations. Now, the next 2 episodes coming out on Tuesdays are both going to feature some amazing guests, so I'm really excited for you to hear those. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please subscribe so you don't miss them. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.